invaded what became the province of Britannia. Marching along the ridge, you can see the iron armour of their lorica segmentata, as it's known, sparkling in the sun. Imagine a massive legion, a full legion of 5,000 men approaching you if you were a Celtic hill fort. Ordinary Celtic farmers and people in your hill fort thinking, can we resist these invaders? And coming towards you is the Panzer Division of the ancient world, and you have no chance. This is but a small detachment of Roman soldiers. They will, however, be able to show you the evolutions, drill and tactics of the world's mightiest army for hundreds of years. It wasn't the first professional army. The Assyrians were the first to do that. However, the Assyrians were so ruthless that eventually rebellions overthrew them. The Romans, on the other hand, were rather more subtle. On the battlefield, they were crushingly ruthless. If you were in your hill fort, and imagine you are here looking down on the Roman legion surrounding you, and you don't surrender, you will die. Because if the Romans get through that gate, they will kill everything that's alive. Man, woman, child, dog, cat, livestock, everything. Nobody spared. Until the officers say, stop the killing. Because these soldiers are so highly trained, they will do exactly what they were told to do, however distasteful. There is nothing nice about an ancient battle. We're talking serious hand-to-hand fighting, where you can feel the breath of your enemy on your face as he kills you or you kill him. The Romans were simply the most efficient killing machine in the ancient world. But there was more to the Romans. They would conquer a province, and they would perhaps destroy its army. They would perhaps enslave the entire male population if that had been particularly troublesome. If the province fell relatively easily, or if that province or nation surrendered, then the Romans would instantly switch tactics and wave the carrot instead of the stick. Because if you joined in with the Roman way of life, became a Roman citizen, then all the benefits of Rome became yours, as your country became part of the greater empire of Rome. And it was a route that many conquered peoples took and did not regret. Coming on now, coming on fast, in a skirmish line, we have the auxiliary troops. They're dressed in what we would call chainmail. Latin scholars call it harmata, lorica harmata. They have a round skirmishing shield and a long stabbing spear, and they're clearing the way, along with a wing of archers there, for the heavy infantry that are coming up behind. Now, the auxiliaries are actually recruited from conquered or allied territories. If you join the auxiliaries in 25 years' time, when you've served your term, you become a Roman citizen, and so does your family. It's the ultimate prize. And once you unlock that door with that golden key, you are Rome. In one generation, you've gone from perhaps an agrarian farmer in a hill fort to a Roman citizen. It was a system that worked very, very well. But often to do it, it took the army. And here come the heavy infantry, the legionarii, the heavy infantry, the citizen infantry of Rome, the legionary troops themselves, with their iron armour and their rectangular shields. The standards at the head, the centurio or centurion marching at the head of his men. And to tell you more about the Roman army, I'm going to hand you over now to a very important gentleman, the magnifer of the auxilia, because he carries so-called, because an image of the emperor, this one being Vespasianus. So he's a very important officer. He's also extremely knowledgeable about the Roman army, and in a second he's going to tell you all about it.
Of the Roman soldier. In a moment the men will stop marching and will fall out so that we can demonstrate some of the individual soldiers, the different types of ranks and their armour and equipment. We will then show you how the soldiers were trained. After that we will show you some of the battle tactics which made the Roman army so successful, and then finally we will demonstrate some Roman artillery weapons. So you have two basic types of soldiers in front of you, legionary soldiers and auxiliary soldiers. The main difference was that the legionaries were the citizen soldiers. These men were Roman citizens. They joined the army for a period of 25 years. If they were married when they enlisted, they were automatically divorced. And they were not legally allowed to marry whilst in service, the idea being to keep the army mobile so that if you needed to move troops from one end of the empire to the other, you were literally just moving the troops rather than their families as well. So to take a closer look at some of the legionary soldiers. As you look at these men, both the legionaries and the auxiliaries, bear in mind that in Europe and in Britain, they're equipped to fight against Celts. And the favourite weapon of the Celt was a long slashing sword, which they would use to hack down at the top half, the head and shoulders of their opponent. So this armour is designed to protect the men against that. If you look at the helmets, usually of iron, though there are some bronze ones. They've got very good protection with a brow band going across the forehead, large cheek pieces to protect the face, and also a large neck guard to protect the back of the head and the top of the shoulder.
But they have a slightly different sword called a sparta, slightly narrower and slightly longer than the infantry sword. If you look now at the equipment on the horses, the saddles are very special. They're made of wood, and in each corner, each of the four corners of the horse, so the man sits in the centre of these four horns and can use them to get good purchase and a good seat on his horse. And for that reason, the Romans never invented the stirrup. It simply wasn't necessary. By using these saddles, they can do everything which a modern rider would use the stirrup for. Finally, you'll see a lot of elaborate metalwork on the horse harness. That's made of bronze, which has been silvered. Partly it's there for decoration, but also the weight of the metal helps to keep the straps in place, and the straps help to keep the saddle in place. Now we know an awful lot about Roman training methods as a result of Roman history which has survived. We know that the Romans liked to recruit men from an agricultural or a manual working background, so they were fit and strong. They had to meet certain physical requirements of height and fitness. They'd also have to produce written references to show they were of good character. Once they got into the army, they were put on a basic training course which lasted for about 4 months. So the office commander could issue an order and have no confidence that then all the taken inheritance or assuming the other tribe of loyalty. In the Roman army, the individual soldier was there to fight for his pay, and also to fight as part of a much bigger body of people in the office. So this sort of activity was going on throughout the soldiers' career. Many forces were excavated and a massive nets round outside of the parade ground. We used for the parade, but also we used to do drill like this. Not necessarily every day, but there are soldiers like that were tested, dead shot. And even if the market is about to at least prepare for it.
Talking of tombstones, the writings you see here are dressed in the way that you see on tombstones from Britain and from Germany and France. But the man being armoured in a similar way to the infantry, but the horse not really carrying armour. The Romans also recruited men from North Africa and Numidians, who rode without any armour at all, just as light lancers, which you'll see demonstrated in a moment. These are very handy if you want to ride up towards dismounted opponents, cast these light javelins at them and then ride away on the path. In a similar way, the Romans used whole regiments of horse archers, where instead of being equipped with lancers, the men were equipped with bows and arrows, and they could ride up to enemy infantry and shoot arrows at them, and if the enemy infantry attacked, they could ride away safely out of range. It's fair to say that the Persians over in the Middle East did a similar thing, and at least one Roman army was defeated by horse archers who continually harried them at a distance. Out in the Middle East, the Romans and the Persians also used regiments of cataphracts. These were heavily armoured cavalry, where the men and the horses were covered in armour. And that would have gone from head to hoof. So another pass with the Germans.
Yep.
Now to
demonstrate the use of the Sparta or sword, we hunted high and low to try and get some Celtic heads. Had no success, and I'm afraid cabbages will have to do. And as you see, these swords could be used both for stabbing and for slashing. The rider needs that extra reach, which he gets from having a Sparta. And now charge with the point of the sword. I hope you'll agree that was very effective. And now you can judge for yourself the relative merits of man on horse and man on foot. The cavalryman has the advantage in terms of the shock impact of the weight of a man on a horse going at speed. If, however, they lose that, the advantage to the cavalryman, particularly if he can get past the lance point and attack the man or the horse. We know that infantry would use missiles, though the cabbage is not well recorded in the Roman world. Now a good bit of hand-to-hand fisticuffs. I should point out that in a real battle, a cavalry regiment would number either 500 or 1,000 men, so this individual combat would be multiplied many times. And then the hope would be to break the enemy infantry, to get them running, to test them into a retreat, and then turn that retreat into a rout. And at that point the cavalry would be released to attack the enemy, to chase them off the battlefield, hopefully ride them down. For that reason, the cavalry regiment was known as an ala, which is Latin for wing, because they were positioned on the flanks of the army to protect it against enemy cavalry and to be ready to attack enemy infantry when they retreated. And in this case, he's making a run for it, but we do have an anti-cavalry formation in readiness for such an eventuality. So that concludes the training period. At the end of the training, the men would go off to serve for their 25 years, not necessarily the unit. There's plenty of evidence for Roman soldiers moving from legion to legion, and even from legion to auxiliary unit if it gained a promotion. So the next part of the display will show you some of the tactics which were used by the army in the field. These tactics were very successful, largely because the enemy was so disorganised, and it meant that relatively small Roman armies could often defeat much larger barbarian hordes simply because they had the drill and discipline to do so. There were also times of civil war, though, particularly in the period we represent, and at that time any advantage from drill, equipment and discipline would have been neutralised because Roman soldiers were fighting other Roman soldiers equipped and trained in the same way. The men are protected by the shields at the front and on their heads, so as missiles are thrown down, they'll bounce off, and engineers can march forward inside the testudo, and when it gets to the gates, they come forward and start hacking away at the hinges of the gate to break it down. The only defense against this is hot oil or hot water, but that's very difficult to use. It needs facilities to be able to prepare it, and it takes a lot of time to have it ready.
I got caught.
As you can see, they can go quite quickly, and they can also manoeuvre whilst in this formation. And of course, once the gates have been breached, then the men can drop their shields, like so, and charge in through the gate. 5,500. Be quite an impressive sight. Now the next formation is called the cuneum or wedge. It was to hit the enemy on at one particular point to break his line into two. As you watch this, please bear in mind that those Celtic soldiers were very poorly equipped, Only the richest, the nobles, would be able to afford armour like mail and helmets. Most of the ordinary soldiers, peasant levies, who would be equipped with a spear, possibly a shield or a sword, and therefore they would be relatively naked against this sort of attack. And each of these individual Roman soldiers, the private soldiers, are as well equipped as the Celtic noblemen.
Well, you might as well put it in one overflow.
And unfortunately for the Celts, they never invented the English heritage double-take barrier. Yesterday's attack resulted in one broken leg and one broken shoulder, and that was amongst the Romans, not the crowd. So anyway, the men quickly regained their... Now the next part of the display will involve a demonstration of the artillery, and as the men march back, I'll tell you a little bit about that. The Romans did not invent artillery, that was done by the Greeks, but the Romans took Greek ideas and adapted it to their own needs. Obviously in the ancient world there's no gunpowder, there's no explosive, so you won't get things that you've heard with the demonstrations. But Roman artillery weapons get their power from twisted skeins of rope, which in ancient times was made of animal sinew. You would break the sinew down into fibres and spin it and then make rope just as you would in a modern rope. It's made of sinew, except on its very top there's a great deal of energy contained in it when it's stretched and twisted. You'll see three types of artillery weapons. The smallest one, which is in the middle, is called the catapulta. It shoots large arrows. The big one over on the left-hand side is called a ballista, and it throws stones. And the third one over the right-hand side, just in front of the press tower, is an onager, which is also a stone thrower. But any discussion of artillery really has to start with the archers. So hopefully in a minute, the archers will come forward and start their part of the display. Now the archers are using a type of bow called a composite bow, which is a wooden bow that gets a great deal of extra power because built into its construction is animal sinew and animal horn. And this is compressed and stretched when the arrow is shot, and you can make a very powerful bow. And the Greeks who invented this type of bow were able to make very powerful bows, and eventually they were able to make a bow which was so powerful that a man couldn't pull it back. So to be able to use it, they had to develop some sort of mechanism to draw it back, and that was the result. Or rather, the result of that was a machine called the Gustrapity, which is a kinetic crossbow. And then you can make the bow bigger and bigger, and then there comes a point where you can't make the bow any bigger, and someone had the bright idea of using skeins of rope. So the archers will be shooting in their own time, shooting light but deadly arrows, and contrast that with the catapulta, which shoots arrows but very much bigger and heavier ones than an archer can shoot. There goes the catapulta. The catapulta was issued on the basis of one to each century, so there'll be about 120 in a legion, and these will be used to put down a barrage of missiles against the enemy. The archers will be organised into cohorts of archers, so you have either 480 or 800 men, and they could be positioned amongst the infantry to keep off enemy attacks, or to concentrate their fire onto one particular part of the enemy line. The onager and the ballista are really siege engines. They were used to lob heavy missiles at the walls of the enemy's fortification or launch them over. As you can see, these machines can be picked up and carried by men, but we also know that very much bigger machines were used. From Jerusalem, there is stone shots which were used by the Romans, which weigh 100 weight. And the ballista capable of shooting those would have been about 60 feet high. Now, the crew of the Onager are winding that arm back, great deal of strain and power in it. And the crew of the ballista are just preparing to wind theirs back. So if you look closely, you'll see they latch the mechanism onto the string. And they will start to wind the ratchet back, pulls back a wooden table, on which they will place the stone. In the meantime, the archers are keeping up a very heavy rate of fire against those static targets. Here goes the Onager. There goes the ball high through the air, whack against the pot. Eyes on the ballista now. They're ready to go. There again, another stone ball. In the moment, the Onager. Onager gets its name from a class of wild ass, which was known for its kick. So there'll be, I think, one more shot from the ballista, and then that will be the end of the artillery display, and indeed the end of the Roman display. The men will line up to salute the standard.
How do you see his image? Two ways, obviously on the coinage, but more importantly, the magnifer. This officer, therefore, is terribly important to me on campaign and elsewhere. He carries the standard high, so all the troops can see the image of their emperor. And remember that emperor worship was an important part of Roman religion. So it's not just an esprit de corps thing, it's also a religious icon, if you like, which the troops officially worship. Although I imagine a lot of the tough legionary troops didn't have a lot of time for that sort of thing. Ladies and gentlemen, the Romans salute their emperor. Why don't you salute them, the Imperial Roman Army? These troops are drawn from several societies. The Ermine Street Guard, of course, one of the longest standing historical groups in Britain. The Antonine Guard from Scotland, the Colchester Roman Society, the Gemina project from Holland, the VIII Augusta, the 14th Gemina, and of course, the troops on horseback, the auxiliary soldiers from the troop. Off the soldiers go, and they will be back as part of the grand parade a little later on in all their glory, leading the parade of 20 brigades of troops through the ages. Now, another reminder, please.